He is the seed of the grandfather, who is the seed of Ahu Acha. He came from Calcutta, stick and a bag on his shoulder, with your banana capra. So I am part seed of India. The Indian ship on this level, find together to resist in unity. There was no more mother Africa, no more mother India, just mother Trinity. My Bahuka planted sugar cane, drum in the roady plane. So Ram Logan was there for Kashana. It's Jahadi Pai, brotherhood on the board. Jahadi Pai, brotherhood on the board. Jahadi Pai. To Allah, if I choose respect of color, Mahuta had to make that journey for I to have sympathy. So it is a great privilege to have such unique heritage. 50% Africa, 50% India. I have joined today to holiday, emancipation and arrival day. And Razak made a journey, 150 years gone already. So whether you're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, let's walk this land hand in hand. We could only prosper if we try. Jahadi Pai, brotherhood on the board. Jahadi Pai, brotherhood on the board. Jahadi Pai, Kumayo, Zimbabwe. Oh my head in the way I go. Oh my head in the way. Oh my head in the way I go. Oh my head in the way. Oh my head in the way I go. Don't give back to African descendants if you want to know the truth. They're catching back to you. And somewhere on that journey, you will see a man in a dhoti saying he prays in front of a chanty. Then and only then you'll understand what is the cosmopolitan nation. There's no room for prejudice at all. United we stand, divided we fall. So whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Christian, just know that in this land we could only prosper if we try. Jahadi Pai, brotherhood on the board. Jahadi Pai, brotherhood on the board. Jahadi Pai. We should learn to be one. Our ancestors came by boat. Taste the salt water in your throat. You see from and Amanda, the great grandpa and grandmama. One was a slave and one was in danger. But the really generous of color didn't interfere with their love for each other. Nani, nani. I am proof of racial unity, and that is the way everyone should be. Everyone should have each one in their prayer. Let's show each other we care. As we all know, incoming Malhai, unity is strength. Brotherhood on the board. Brotherhood on the board. Oh my head in the way, oh my head in the way, But the religions of color didn't interfere with the love for each other. Nani, nani. I am proof of racial unity, and that is the way everyone should be. Everyone should have each one in their prayer. Let's show each other we care. As we all know, incoming high, unity is strength. Brotherhood of the boat. Brotherhood of the boat. If you want to get rid of enmity in this country, just raise your hand. You want to get rid of enemy in Trinity, raise your hand.
Oh, yes. Ajibai. Brotherhood of the Boat. Jahaji Bai. BHAI. Brotherhood of the Boat. Brother Marvin. I still wonder what Pandit say he's not a Bai. I wonder. We're teaching. We're teaching Brotherhood of the Both. Brotherhood of the Boat. There was Brotherhood of the Boat for Africans too, you know. That's where the term Mati come from. Brotherhood of the Boat. We all came on boats, and we all had to form brotherhood and sisterhood. On the boat, Jahaji Bai. Good evening to all of you stars tonight. I have friends tonight. And they're going to be here shortly. Another day, another struggle, and we continue to face the perils. But there is hope. There is hope. And we are going to continue to keep hope alive, as Brother Jackson said. Brother Marvin, Jahaji Bai, please share the link, share the live, because we are going to be ready in a couple of minutes.
Hello, hello, Mr. India. Hello, my Indo-Trinbiconian. I bring you love from deep, deep, deep within me. Love meant to clear the hurdles of our history. But there is one thing we must never fail to understand. The African was the first to come here, then the Indian came second. And African toil and they toil and they labor. And they cried and they died under master. So when you celebrating the richness of your culture, you Africa, plenty more than you owe India. Cause the culture we went through is alien to you. The only contract we had was with death. The road you come and trod, made with African blood. Thank God that's now a historical silhouette. So celebrate your African brothers. Reach out and touch and make up this stagger. For all those who walk the plank, from whom culture was young, Mr. Indian man, it's time you tell the African dance. Oh, nine, 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 if Miss Europe had 2 yard boys in her service, and she emasculate the first one of the two, dehumanize, deculturize, and dismiss, make him sweat for no pay, he going to be blue. And when he escaped on the fire, he quit the job and room. The next boy just stripped in with pay and passage to go home. Plus his food, his family, and his culture, and freedom to worship and together. The first boy must feel a double sense of deep hurt and target the latter, who was shown a greater sense of self-worth. For we will never let them facts lead us into racial cracks. We will not succumb to the leanings of that era. We choose to look beyond recrimination, to stay away from all conflict and from fracas. So celebrate your African brother. Give him a front seat in your Diwali Naga. Don't bother to pull rank with your money in the bank, Mr. Indian man. It's time you tell the African dance. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Apart from a very small group of the Mandingo who went back home to Gambia and Senegal, all the ex-slaves, they remain in Trinbago, adopting diverse moods of living and survival. But whereas the land for the Indians spelled prosperity, for Africans it just means more pain and misery. And the curse of the land was so vivid that for some even work was blacklisted. So when Indian became this multiple landowner, it's because African was running from their anathema. We're not lazy, that's the truth, and we're very brave too. We love to sing, we love to dance, but don't you be fooled. For we true identity, just look beyond slavery for invention that no slavery can overrule. So celebrate your African brother. From when he starts, he's a big, big time achiever. He embraces you in his rank. So if we must be frank, Mr. Indian man, it's time you tell the African dance. Isn't so as that? Here, I'm bam, 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 My love for you is not about your food or your woman, although such things form a lesser part of the mix. It just makes sense in this captive situation to build upon with historical dynamics. So don't be so quick to jump at a calypso or two. 100 songs give you praise, take the holistic view. Don't be caught using race as a divider. And you are black, cause Indian is not a color. Don't you hide under the guise of education and use university to cause no great division. The richness we both share because we end up here. Neither one will enjoy back in we homeland. We're very polyglot, plenty flavor in the pot. The sum total of each other's contribution. So celebrate using race as a divider. And you are black, cause Indian is not a color. Don't be caught using race as a divider. And you are black, cause Indian is not a color. Don't be caught using race as a divider. And you are black, cause Indian is not a color. Take the holistic view. Don't be caught using race as a divider. And you are black, cause Indian is not a color. Don't you hide under the guise of education and use university to cause no great division. The richness we both share because we end up here. Neither one will enjoy back in we homeland. We're very polyglot, plenty flavor in the pot. The sum total of each other's contribution. So celebrate your African brother. He helped to break the caste system in India. The Ganges water I drank, so meet me on Nile River bank, Mr. Indian man. It's time you tell the African tongues. Oh, neither one will enjoy back in we homeland. We're very polyglot, plenty flavor in the pot. The sum total of each other's contribution. So celebrate your African brother. He helped to break the caste system in India. The Ganges water I drank, so meet me on Nile River bank, Mr. Indian man. It's time you tell the African tongues. Oh, Lambambo, Bambe, Lambambo,
Oh, yes, that was Roy Lewis, the mystic prowler, Mr. Indian. Tell the African thanks. I hope one day Guyana will say thanks to us. If you sing a song, a calypso like that in Guyana, they jail you. Because the next day on the headline, it will say, Dr. Hinds disparage Indians because he said that Indians should say thanks to Africans. But when you go deep in the Calypso say Africans must also say thanks to Indians, because we have this polyglot. We take from each other. We both enjoy things here that we would not enjoy if we go back to where we come from. It's a calypso that has Black nationalism, historical memory, talks about the meeting of the Ganges and the Nile, the meeting of the African and the Indian in this strange land, and what that means. One of the most profound calypsos. And remember, Mr. Indian, you're not a race, because Indian is not a color. Very deep, very, 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 very deep. Very deep. Very deep. The conversation on ethnicity, when ethnic groups clash in a strange land. One day I hope they tell us thanks for really discussing difficult questions, as Vincent Alexander and I were talking about last night. One of the reasons that Guyana continues to have its ethnic problems is that we don't acknowledge that we got ethnic problems. And we don't talk openly about our ethnic and racial problems. The mystic prowler would be jailed if he were in Guyana today for saying that Indians must say thanks to Africans. And Africans must say thanks to Amerindians. And all of us must say thanks to East Indians. But we have to open up the history and not afraid to talk about it. But Guyana, there's a penalty for talking about the most fundamental problems that we have. We have lots of problems, yeah? Plenty. We are post-plantation society, post-slavery society, post-indenture society, post-colonial society. Them things come with their inherent challenges. So we're not an easy place. When you hear West Indians say, boy, you're uneasy, that man uneasy, that woman uneasy, it's a language that comes out of a recognition of our complexity. It's not that other people don't use the word easy, but they don't use it like we West Indians. It's a recognition that Ting Regula. Somebody in this morning paper, Dr. Hinds has descended into a degeneracy of Guyana because he preaches anti-Indian racism. I probably uplift Indian people more than some of those people who wall in the salt and pepper mouth. Because what do they know of India who only India knows? But we are continuing to lift our nation. We are continuing to lift our nation. The multiracialism that we subscribe to is not putting an Indian face next to an African face. That is surface. Surface. It's not the essence of our being. Is not the curry, chicken or chicken curry, and the cook up and the pepper pot. That is the diversity. Is when you go to an Indian home at Christmas and you get the curry, the pepper pot, and the cook up on one table. That is the diversity. And when you go to the African home, you don't just see cook up. You get the dal and the curry, and you get the pepper pot on the one table. That's the diversity. That's the multiracialism. You can live next to Indians. That don't make us multiracial. You know, you in your Indian space, I in my African space, Amerindian in the Amerindian space. Is how we transcend those spaces, not by losing ourselves, but by preserving ourselves in this new thing that is emerging because of our spatial proximity. Chaos in order, order in chaos. It's a challenge. And people think that, that if an Indian woman expresses or hurt, she's a racist. Or an African man say, but boy, you come in me house, I wrap you up, I give you sustenance, and you won't go up on the road and cuss me. You stay in me house and cuss me and tell me what a no good I am, and tell me you moving out and you go cross back. And if I say so, I'm entering into racial conversations. We are taking this thing to another level. I'm determined to take this conversation to another level, as we must. A pandit man tell me, ina buy, ina wan buy, ina wan buy. I'm a father. I'm a husband. Ina buy, ina buy. Young father, husband. It's not what he says. He is not. He is what he says. He is not. Is that what he says he is? Is what he is. He is a father. He's a husband. Aye.
Oh, my head in the way, I am the seed of the father. He is the seed of the grandfather. Who is the seed of Bahu Acha? He came from Calcutta. Stick and a bag on his shoulder. Vito banana capra. So I am part seed of India. The Indian ship on this level bind together to resist in unity. There was no more mother Africa, no more mother India, just mother Trinity. My Bahuka jump on the sugar cane, drum in the roady plain. So Ram Logan Master Prakashana. It's Jihadi Pie, brotherhood on the board. Brotherhood on the board. I would be a disgrace to Allah if I choose respect of color. Mahuta Jahan to make that journey for I to have sympathy. So it is a great privilege to have such unique heritage. 50% Africa, 50% India. I have joined you to do holiday, emancipation and arrival day. This battle Razak made a journey, 150 years gone already. So whether you're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, let's work and stand hand in hand. We could only prosper if we try. Shahaji Pai, brotherhood on the board. Brotherhood on the board. Kumayeo, Zimbabwe. Kumayeo, Zimbabwe, Ayayo. Kumayeo, Zimbabwe. Kumayeo, Zimbabwe, Ayayo. Kumayeo, Zimbabwe. Kumayeo, Zimbabwe, Ayayo. For those who play in ignorance, don't give back to African descendants. If you want to know the truth, they catch him back to you. And somewhere on that journey, you will see a man in a dhoti saying he prays in front of a chanty. Then and only then you'll understand what is the cosmopolitan nation. There's no room for prejudice at all. United we stand, divided we fall. So whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Christian, just know that in this land we could only prosper if we try. Magic man, brotherhood on the board.
I'm going to say something. An Indian could, an African could sing a calypso like that. An Indian may try, but he or she wouldn't be able to do it with the precision. The African could witness for the Indian. Brother Marvin there is talking about national unity from the perspective of the Indian. Given the way our history worked, the African could do that easier. There are Indians who sing about national unity, but not from the African perspective. That is difficult. But the African can do it because the African went through slavery. So when the African gaze takes him into indentureship, he been there. He appreciates, he understands the pain of the Indian. The Indian come when slavery done. The Indian has to learn about African pain from books. The African are gonna read Indian pain in books. You all get me going here tonight. You all get me going here tonight. Right? The African does not have to read books to understand the Indian pain. But the Indian got to read books to understand the African pain. Because when the Indian came, the African had come off the plantation. And so when the Indians see the African running from the plantation, he said, God, he lazy. Had the Indian been here during slavery, he would understand that the African running from slavery, because that's what the plantation meant. You all understand where the ignorance come from. Brother Marvin could do that, and Brother Marvin take a lot of stick, because the part of the African narrative is that there can be no unity by just 50% African, 50% Indian. The African is saying the African has to be restored. His rights, his personhood, her humanity has to be restored before you can have racial unity. So Marvin takes stick for it. An African man talking about unity through the Indian eye. Hey. Anyhow, let's bring in my friends them tonight. Jaji Bai, you see, the pundits say he's not a Bai, he's not a Jahaji Bai. He's a father, he's a husband, and he's a man. You're throwing. He may not even know the hint that he's throwing. He may not even know the hint that he's throwing. But me have already, because he lie down on a road for black man. And we are, and must be a people of gratefulness. We must be a people of gratefulness. When we bought our lands and turned them into village, we didn't name them Abuja. We named the first one Victoria. For all them Boxing people Afrocentric. They didn't name the village Yoruba. They named it after Thomas Fowell Buxton, a white abolitionist. Gratefulness. We as African people have to be grateful. The problem is when people are ungrateful to us. And that is the conversation that our country avoids. Yes, John. Yeah. Good evening to you, Brother Rohit.
Good evening, Dr. Hines. Good evening to viewers. Good evening,
Audreyanna.
Thomas.
As usual, the disclaimer is that you are not responsible for anything I said before you come on, right? But you are free. You're invited to make some general remarks on my general remarks. Starting with you, Brother Rohit, and then we go over to Sister Audreyanna.
Thank you, Dr. Hines. It is said that patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. You can substitute racism into that. Racism has become the last refuge of the scoundrels today. I would argue that the Indian experience is very recent. And given the African history, there's a sense of belonging on the part of Africans to the Caribbean and Guyana. I think that in contemporary terms, Indians are a recent arrival, and I don't think we have developed a comfort level of belonging. And I would argue that gives us a sense of insecurity, and we have to work past that.
Brother Rohit Kanhai, yes, some of you are inquiring, which means some of you have been skulking. Yes, Mr. Rohit Kanhai is a co-leader of the WPA. Some of y'all been skulking, so y'all not been coming to class recently. Rohit Kanhai is a co-leader of the WPA. Sister Audreyanna, anything that you want to comment on my comments?
Dr. Hines, good evening to you and good evening to Brother Rohit Kanhai and to your viewers. Dr. Hines, I was listening to you and I was really doing some introspection as you were speaking. Introspection and reflection. And Brother Rohit, I have listened to you on Dr. Hines' program, and I must say to you that I appreciate your humanity. You're an Indo-Guyanese and I'm an African Guyanese, but I connect with you at the level of our humanity, in addition to being a Guyanese, etc. Dr. Hines, I think we are at a pivot. You're welcome. You're welcome. We're at a pivotal moment in Guyana's history. And I think when you talk about the sensitivities of the current or the seeming sensitivities of current Indo-Guyanese, I would like to sort of refine that a bit to say that it's not necessarily the current Indo-Guyanese, but it's more or less the direction that the leadership is taking the country. And I would single out Vice President Barajagdio, President Irfan Ali, and the Attorney General Anil Nandlal. And the reason I'm singling them out is because I'd like to take you back to, I think it was early 2020 when I remember when Annette Ferguson, Member of Parliament Annette Ferguson, had said something in Parliament, and the Chief of Staff had complained that she was something about his emotions or something to that effect. And the DPP had recommended, I think, charges for Annette Ferguson. Now, Annette Ferguson is a member of Parliament, and her task was to provide oversight over whether it be the finances for the Guyana Defense Force, as well as she's a member of Parliament, which is above the Chief of Staff in seniority. But yet the DPP had recommended charges for a member of Parliament while she was asking questions as it relates to her duties. And that was those, we might, for me, who sort of studied societal behavior, organizational behavior, organizational psychology, and things like those, that is not just something in passing. That was an indication of an evolving direction that the society was going in. I remember writing a letter in the press and saying that the DPP was out of order to recommend that Annette Ferguson be charged. And I don't know what had happened to that matter ever since, but I didn't see it go to court or anything. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because what we have seen from 2020 and what we have seen from Indo-Guyanese with, let's say, Barajagdio, Anil Nandlal, and President Irfan Ali with the oil money. I think the oil money was a profound turning point in the Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese relations. And I think one of these days we will study this period, 2020 to 2025, and we would realize the influence that the oil money had on Indo-Guyanese leadership and the shift, rather, because there's a shift in the Indian Guyanese leadership and the attitude and their behavior towards Afro-Guyanese living in Guyana. And I say Afro-Guyanese, I'm going to pause here for a minute. I say Afro-Guyanese living in Guyana because I have observed how the president and the vice president and the government treated the vice president of Ghana. And I think even the president of Ghana and the prime minister of Barbados, those are Black people, but yet they treated them differently than they treated the leader of the opposition, Aubrey Norton, Nigel Hughes. The vice president called Hughes a member of parliament and low life. And so when you study the leadership and the approach to leadership, since we have this oil money, I ask myself, why is it that the government, the vice president, treated the vice president of Ghana, the president of Ghana, and the prime minister of Barbados differently, even though they're Black people, than they treated the people in Maka, than they treated the leader of the opposition, that they treated the leaders in Guyana, the leaders of the opposition in Guyana. And I realized that it comes down to value. And I'm going to pause here and come back to this point of value. Even when you look at what I was looking at Member of Parliament Gita Chandan's display, I call it a display of Parliament, in Parliament. And it was about value. It was about the value that she has placed on the people who she represents. It's about the value, all these people who are going over to the government and they're saying, and they're making a big thing about it. It's about the value that this government has placed and sort of, you would say, an Indo-Guyanese government has placed on the supporters of the opposition, most of whom are Black people. And I'm being very frank. The Bible said, admonish each other in love. And I'm doing this out of all the love in my heart, but I'm being frank and straightforward. And so in addressing this issue, if we want to solve this problem, we have to not broadly sort of generalize Indo-Guyanese leadership. Donald Ramotar is different. Donald Ramotar has a different kind of approach. I mean, even with the oil money, you would not have seen this pompous disregard for Afro-Guyanese from Donald Ramotar, as we are seeing from the vice president, from the president, and from the attorney general. I'll pause here.
Thank you, Sister Audreyanna Thomas. And some of you have not been here. You want to know whether Sister Audreyanna Thomas is a WPA member? No, she is not. But as you know, our recruitment door is open. So, no, she's not. She's not a WPA member, but brother Rohit Kanhai is a co-leader of the WPA. You all are, that's when you see what happens when you all don't come to class very often. You all come and you all playing more bright than the people who come into class every day. Brother Rohit, let Sister Audreyanna introduce the issue of persons crossing from the opposition to the present government. And we had at least two officials, Sister Gita Chandan, who was a general secretary of the PNC. She was a member of parliament. Daniel Siram, who was the chairman, because they still are. He is the chairman of Region 4, which was won by the PNC and the largest region. And in the case of Sister Gita, she stood in Parliament, still a member of the APNU, and said to the world that the APNU is no good. I'm leaving and I am going over to the PPP. She did it in Parliament as a parliamentarian for the APNU. And today, Bharat Jagdeo singled out Winston Jordan, Audreyanna Thomas, and myself for special tongue lashing because we dared to point to that picture of Indian in a predominantly African party rising to prominence in the party above many others who had been in the party years, decades, and never rose to those positions. And now are walking away, but it's not just walking away, it's the way in which they walk away. And Sister Audreyanna, Winston Jordan, and myself addressed the issue from our different standpoints. They can call me an Afrocentric person, right? And I say yes. But in our mix of things, a Winston Jordan is not seen as an Afrocentric person. Sister Audreyanna, I know is quite Afrocentric, but I don't think she would be seen in the same kind of Afrocentric corner that they push me into. But yet all three of us were pushed to address this issue. Not that he's the brother and the sister left, but it's the manner and the context in which the leaving took place. Your thoughts on that issue?
Dr. Hines, it's such a simple issue. It's called ethics and morality. I don't know what other explanation you need. There are ethical ways in handling matters, and they did it in the most unethical way. You have taken great pains to explain in detail that if you wanted to leave a party that you are a member of, you are given representation through that party. Then if you have differences that cannot be fought out within the party and you feel you must leave, then you do the ethical thing. You resign from the party and then you step outside of it. It's so simple and common sense. You really have to be warped in your thinking to find some other way of carrying out such an act. I don't see why it's such a difficult issue to grapple with.
Why it's such a difficult issue to grapple with. And of course, the whole notion of race and ethnicity is why it becomes difficult. Because in racial and ethnic politics, morality is usually subsumed under the notion of racial solidarity or racial conflict. Sister Audreyanna, let me throw the question to you. Because let me quote from what's his name? Carl Greenidge, former vice president. When asked about the crossings, he said it's normal in politics for people to cross the floor. But he went on to say, it went on to talk about the manner in which Sister Gita crossed. He is there with us. And then he said, while they may not carry votes, while it's normal, he said the opposition should not treat it as a light thing. Your thoughts?
Dr. Hines, Brother Rohit talked about ethics and morality. I would talk about principles and values. And to come back to your opening, and this Guyana from 2020 is a different Guyana. And partly it's because coming back to the government, we've seen an erosion of values and principles. And so we were living in Guyana, we had our issues, but we had race issues, but we also had principles. For example, if a Black person goes to the hospital to see an Indian doctor, in Guyana, even though we had race issues, there was never really an issue with an Indian doctor taking care of an Indian patient. There was never really an issue with an Indian judge adjudicating fairly over a matter where the accused is a person of Afro-Guyanese. And I've worked in the justice system, and I can tell you that. And so for a society like ours, this is where principles and values are fundamental, common values and common principles. And I think what this government has done, they have eroded significantly those common values and common principles, which held us together with our differences and our diversity and our different, I would say, cultural orientations. And so when you, for example, at the institutional level, the police, for example, if the police is a principal police force, the principle that applies to Afro-Guyanese will be applied to Indo-Guyanese. But when you erode those principles and the police now have to treat Afro-Guyanese who are protesting differently from how they're treating Indo-Guyanese, then those are some of the fundamentals of the erosion of our society. And I'm an institutionalist. So I'm going to come back to those fundamental, sustainable aspects of the society. And so I think that when I mentioned earlier that we're at a pivotal point in Guyana's history, and this point that we're at is where we have to go back to establishing those principles and values, common principles and common values. We do not need a police force that is professional because the government does not have the authority to make it unprofessional. We need a professional police force because it is part of the mortar that will hold the various parts of this society together and would also help the society in terms of Guyana project of achieving the goals and the objectives of the Guyana project, if I can put it that way. So ethics and morals, as Brother Rohit is saying, but we also need to focus on common values and common principles. I think what this PPPC government has done from 2020 to 2025, Barjagdio sees power as absolute. Absolute meaning that once you have the power, this is in my context, once you have the power, you can use it in an absolute way without necessarily giving consideration to things like limitations, to things like the scope, to things like rule of law, to things like risk, for example. Take, for example, those persons who are going over to the government side from the opposition. After one of the things that people are saying in the opposition camp, like, for example, yesterday there was a certain photograph that was floating around, and some people sent me messages saying that this elections, after they saw that photograph, this elections, we will not only vote like a boss, we will vote like if we're mad. So what the risk of the PPP have all of these high-profile people going over to them. It's not what they're doing. Usually we would discover this when that list is submitted to GCOM. Then we realize that, oh, he's on the list, she's on the PPP list. I didn't know that. Wow. But what is happening now, there's a performance, there's a display. and it is interpreted by the opposition supporters that the intention is to embarrass them. It's to embarrass the leaders. It is to demoralize them. But what it is doing instead, the opposition camp is becoming, it is igniting the opposition camp. It is giving the opposition camp oxygen. And what they're saying is that we will now not only vote like a boss, we will vote like we're mad. So I think that, so that is one side. The other side, Dr. Hinds, if I was a strategist that was advising the opposition, I would say to them to say to the PPP, okay, you take Member of Parliament Gita Chandan, take the Chairman of Region 4, Daniel Siram, and the Vice Chairman, etc., and we will take the sugar industry, because the AP and the opposition can now say to the government that we have produced 2 to 3 times more sugar than you produced from 2020 to 2025. And so the sugar workers now, when they go to the polls, they have to ask themselves, do we want a government that is producing 2 to 3 times less sugar than what the AP and UNAP and AFC government produce? The opposition can now say to the sugar workers that it is not Nagamutu and Ramjatan who destroyed the sugar industry. They saved the sugar industry. It is Nagamutu and Ramjatan government that saved the industry, and they will now rescue the sugar industry because they can now produce 2 to 3 times more sugar. They can produce 200 million US dollars more in revenue for the for Gaisuko. So sugar workers have to decide when they go to the on the 1st. Do you want to vote for the PPPC government that will produce 15,000 tons of sugar in a first crop? Or do you want to vote for the opposition that could produce 2 to 3 times more sugar than the government, than this PPPC government has produced? The opposition also need to say to the sugar workers that this PPPC government, this is not Jagan's PPPC government. What Barjagdia's legacy will be? It will be 1, making the PPPC rich, and 2, destroying the brand of the PPP. So the PPP is no longer our workers, a party. It is now a party of the elites. So the opposition has an opportunity now to take this message. If I was an advisor or a strategist for the opposition, this is what I would say. So you take all of these people, that high-profile people that you want to take. We will take the sugar industry and rescue it. My last point on this is where I would also say to the opposition, to say to the sugar workers that while the PPP is coming and telling you about Barnum the this and Barnum the that, and the PPP the and the PNC this and the PNC that, they took Barnum's son-in-law into their party and they're treating him like a diplomat while they're destroying your sugar industry. So you got to decide when they're telling you these things about Barnum this and Barnum that, tell them that you took Barnum's son-in-law and you made him a diplomat and you're treating him like a diplomat in your party while you are not focusing on the sugar industry and you're destroying the sugar industry. So, yes, Dr. Hinds.
Sister Audreyanna Thomas there, making some great points. Rohit, let me come back to you because I want to pull you out on a couple of issues. The first thing is on the screen there, Kevin says that there's no ethical way to carry out betrayal. The characters of those individuals are simply odious. But Dr. Hinds is the honorizer in chief. He calls them brother and sister. Now, forget the first part. I think here the PPP and the government said Dr. Hinds is the racist in chief. But here is an African brother saying Dr. Hinds is treating these people, he's calling them sister and brother. Rohit, as an Indian brother, peeping in to this almost paradox that is raised there by Kevin. Talk to us.
I think Sister Thomas has made a brilliant point. She is an institutionalist. Institutions have principles, but the difficulty with it is occupied by people. And institutions cannot behave differently from the people that occupy them. So all the principles will be violated in practice. Now, she noted clearly that with the oil economy, behavior has changed dramatically for the worse. Yes, it must of necessity. Oil transforms everything in its path. Now, oil is connected to money and power. There is a saying from the Bible that most people misquote it. They say, money is the root of all evil. That's not true. It's the love of money is the root of all evil, meaning greed and avarice. So when people use that as the starting point, oil, money, power, then the parliament, which is an institution, all the sacred principles are violated. And again, as the Bible said, you have turned my father's house into a den of thieves. That is what our institutions have become. You can go down the list. GCOM has now become that. The institutions that are supposed to give a level playing field to everyone, they're all now corrupt, degenerate, and become den of thieves when they should be sacred institutions. Now I'm going to take this back to what you just asked me. If you treat people as villains and vagabonds and you don't hold them to a certain standard, then your criticism is of no use. You have to set those principles and standards in place, and you have to behave accordingly. So if you call them brothers and sisters, you expect of them to behave in a certain ethical, moral way with principles. If you degenerate in calling them names and behaving in a certain way, you are giving them an escape route. So hold
Yeah.
them to
What I want
an
you to get into, Brother Rohit, is how, for one side, the same person can be, for one side, the racist in chief, and on the other side, the deodorizer in chief. What is driving that? What is the dynamic that is driving that? Because I think it's a very, very important observation that Kevin is raising.
If I'm reading him correctly, I would take it to mean that you are embracing them in an ethical manner. I'm not too sure.
How can one eye see embrace and the other eye see racism? That's what I'm trying to get you to.
Because Mr. Thomas said it plainly. There is the other side claim madness, crazy for an electoral victory. That defines it all. You're not going to see sanity when it comes to oil money. Everything will be subordinated to that. You know, there's a famous poem from Shakespeare where he said, money turns everything into its opposite. It robs men of power they possess and give power to men who do not possess it.
Yeah.
And it turns everything into its opposite. So
yeah. But when you beat people, Brother Rohit, as Sister Audreyanna pointed out, when you beat people as this government has beaten people down, they get to the point where they can't even contemplate calling you a brother and a sister. I think that's the lesson the point Kevin is making there. That you beat people so much and you delude yourself.
Dr. Hines, let me interrupt you here.
Yes, go ahead.
I can't see the point you're making because you know the term biological atavism. Ravi Dev and company use that to describe people, African Americans. Once you understand that, what else do you expect from them?
Yeah.
So my view of them is very clear. I expect no ethics, no morals, and oil has made it 100 times worse. But when the Indian philosopher, in the case of Dev, describes blacks, African Guyanese, as being biological atavism, he's saying you're animals. Your behavior pattern is savage, primitive. That's the starting point. And that is what they use to label the black race.
Yeah. Rohit, let me get your view on this issue, and then I'm going to go over to Sister Audreyanna. There is the phenomenon of Muhammad that is in Guyana now. One cannot avoid it. It's a phenomenon. Whatever you think, whatever view, it's a phenomenon. What I would like you to do is to give us the Indian perspective as you see it on Muhammad, and then I'll go to Sister Audreyanna to give the African perspective of the meaning of this Muhammad moment.
Well, I can read it in several ways. Number one, there's a corruption issue involved. It's a revelation on corruption. Number two, it can be read as dissatisfaction, extreme dissatisfaction with the rulers. People are looking for an option and is grasping at any straw. Thirdly, as much as I hate to say it, there might be inclination towards the disunity in the opposition. So we have to get our act together to present a viable alternative that people can believe in and work together for the removal of this regime.
Let me ask a follow-up. Do you think Indian people are fooling Muhammad? Do you think that there is some plot between Muhammad and the PPP? Talk to us. That's where I want you to go. Help us to get into the Indian mind as he or she is engaging this phenomenon.
I think there's an element of self-preservation on behalf of the Mohammeds. They have humongous resources, and this is an attempt to protect their fortunes. Having political clout may be another way to protect that fortune. So they have the resources, they're spending it. I don't think it will work the way they want it to work. So I think it's a straw in the wind.
Sister Audreyanna, and I want you to put on your African hat here, because Muhammad is getting similar responses from both ethnic communities. All right? Let me make some observations and then I'll leave you to go with it. I've been paying keen attention to what Africans are telling Muhammad. They're telling Muhammad the PPP is terrible. I hadn't been paying attention to it before, but I started to pay attention to it. They're not cussing the PNC to Muhammad. They're not cussing the APNU to Muhammad. They are cursing the government to Muhammad. And I think that's an interesting observation. It has escaped me before, and I only this past week began to recognize it. Talk to us about the African mindset in this moment and how Muhammad fit or doesn't fit into that.
Dr. Hines, I think Muhammad is capitalizing on an opportunity, I would say. Over the past 30 years, what we have seen, and this is not in a biased way, a biased criticism of the PPP. I think it's a fair criticism. So what we've seen over the past 30 years, we've seen watering down of, let's say, associations in the society, the Girl Guides, the Boy Scouts, the generally the Young Brigade and National Cadet Corps. These are all the youth organizations we've seen, or positive youth organizations. And we've seen, I remember growing up, we had the Girl Guides, you had boys. I was a part of the Young Brigade and National Cadet Corps, which was a part of the Guyana National Service. And there were all of these different church youth groups, all sorts of youth groups. So over the past, or youth associations, over the past 30 years, we've seen a reduction of associations. In the absence of positive associations, negative associations would replace them, in the sense of people always have a sense of, they want a sense of belonging. So over the past 30 years, we've had that gap, for example. And we have young people now, let's say 30 years and under. I would say even, or 40 years and younger, because 30 years ago, those persons who are 40 now would have been 10. And so we would have seen those people, we've had a gap in terms of how the society evolved. So now we're at this stage here where we have persons who I would say under 40, who would have been exposed to a society without all of these various, let's say, associations and various opportunities, alternative opportunities to, say, academics. And even sports has been reduced. So what Muhammad is benefiting from now is that gap. Also, the opposition has to take some responsibility for what they have, the neglect, so to speak, of their base over the period of that 30-year period. And like I said, this is not a biased criticism of the PPP's government. I think it is fair criticism from an intellectual academic standpoint also. And so the opposition has to take some responsibility. Somebody said to me, they asked some young people, why do you like Muhammad? They say, I like how he dressed and how he talk. I can understand a young man identifying with how Muhammad, how he dresses and how he speaks and so on. I can understand that, young man rather. I can understand that. So, but when it comes to beyond the way how he dresses and how he speaks and the rest of it, the question has to be asked: do we want to give Muhammad the authority? This is about authority to make decisions over our lives. My answer to that is no. I've worked for a long time, almost 25 years in international community. I've worked in, dealing with, and I would say that, and the reason, not because I don't like Mr. Muhammad, but it's because what will happen if Mr. Muhammad should become president? It would set Guyana back 20 years. 20 years, and the reason it would set Guyana back is because being a president, running a government, is not like running a business. And I
Right,
think
right,
we noticed
right,
some people even
right,
internationally discovered that recently. Right?
right,
Running
right,
a
right.
government is a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah,
And so,
Sister Adriana, I don't think any of those young people think that Muhammad is going to win an election and run Guyana. But here, let me go back to my original question.
okay,
If you look at the responses, Indian people are cussing the PPP to Muhammad. They're not cussing APNU. Black people are cussing the PPP to Muhammad. They're not cussing Norton and the APNU. I want you and Rohit to put your teeth into that and try to tell us what is it that we are seeing there. What is that telling us?
okay. So I think that one of the things that, and forgive me if I look at this in such a structured way, right? For example, there was a time when if you had a complaint about GPL, you would write GPL. GPL has a complaints department. So you would have had to take that complaint to GPL. Now, if you have a complaint about GPL, you can send it to Melibel. You can send it to Rickford Burke. You can send it to, so society has changed. And so the way I see it is Mohammed is people complaining about the PPP. It's an alternative to where there is a gap in where else do I go to complain? But like you said, it's not that they think that he can really solve the problem, but it is really an opportunity for me to express my disgust, my dissatisfaction, my pain, and my hurt. He presents that opportunity. I'll close here by saying that what we need to do, and I was telling somebody that what Muhammad could do, I think his best, somebody's asking, what do you think is his best role or his best place in society if he wants to evolve? And I was saying his best place would be, he doesn't have, like I said the last time, that conceptual skills, technical skills to be president, but he has good people skills. Yeah. So how can you harness that people skills?
I don't want you to give him free advice on this program, Sister Audreyanna. Rohit, let me come to you because I'm still pressing this question. Is it that what Muhammad has succeeded in doing is to take us into how deep the PPP has alienated both ethnic communities, and that the PPP is not aware of that deep alienation? Rohit?
I would concur with that, Dr. Hines. It's obvious. Maybe that's why I'm not pushing it beyond that point. But the body of dissatisfaction is huge. And when you factor in that this government has oil money at its disposal and the Mohammeds can make an impact, it's telling you that oil money is not reaching the places and the people that it needs to reach. You have a huge disparity between those who control the wealth and those who are benefiting from it at the working class level. So it's exposing some very deep wounds in the society that needs to be healed. And people look, to another source for it outside of the government.
Some quick rapid fire question. Rohit, starting with you, and then I go to Sister Audreyanna. Is there going to be a free and fair election?
I cannot see with GCOM behaving the way it does, doing everything to sabotage the possibility of a free and fair elections. Obvious things that it should be doing, it refuses to do. But we have no other option but to fight the battle. As we engage in battle, whatever unfolds will, as much as it can, to lead to a result that reflects the will of the people.
Audreyanna, are we going to get free and fair elections?
Dr. Hines, I was just quickly looking for an article that I saw yesterday in the Demerara Waves, which said I think that the draft voters list has 700 and something thousand people, and the population, I can't recall which organization, put the population at 814,000, I think. So if you have a population of 814,000 and you have a draft electoral list of 700 and something thousand, I think 740 something thousand people, I think that is that has raised all sorts of red flags for me. But I believe that we will have free and fair at this stage. Let me say at this stage, 2 months before elections, I would say yes, we can have free and fair elections. While
will
there,
we? As you look at things now, if the elections were going to be held tomorrow, given where GCOM is, are we going to have free and fair elections?
I think there are lots. I would say that there are lots of issues. One is that voters list. You cannot have a population of 814,000 people and have a voters list of 740 something people. But okay, and so that is one issue. Another issue for me is why a census report has not been published as yet. And that to me is another red flag. And it is also linked to the elections.
So your answer seems to be no. Be doing some rapid fire now.
No, my answer is not no, Dr. Hines. I was just saying to you that these are some of the concerns I have and some of the serious concerns. But I do believe that we could have free and fair elections.
Right, we could have it. You're not sure whether we would. Rohit, the opposition base is almost universally agreed on one thing, and that is that if all the opposition forces were to come together, they would defeat the PPP, in particular the APNU and the AFC. The leaders of these two entities have not come to that conclusion, it seems, that their base has come to. And they find themselves in a gridlock at the top. What may account for that disconnect between a steely resolve on the part of the people, the base, and the ambivalence on the part of the leadership? And so give us your thoughts on that, and then I'll go to Audreyanna. I remember we are doing rapid fire, so not a big, long thesis.
Dr. Hines, I really cannot get into the minds of people who think that this is not the most critical election facing us. Every member of the opposition should be putting their shoulder to the wheels together to remove this government. And I don't think the masses will follow any opposition that does not put at its ultimate aim the removal of the current government. And if it has to unify, if the masses have to unify and dismiss the other parties that don't want to come into the coalition to ensure that this election doesn't go the way of the PPP, then they will dismiss.
Let me ask you this, Rohit. Again, your party, the WP, which I am part of, has been the only political party on the opposition side that has never wavered when it comes to the issue of a grand coalition. Never wavered. It never argued about consensus candidate. It never argued about who's electable and so on. It never got into that thing. The only party, the media doesn't give us credit for it. The pundits never give us credit for it. Is it that your party is more connected to the heartbeat of the base and that the other parties are not connected to it? I think it's that kind of question that I'm trying to ask you guys here. What is it that causes this disconnect between the leadership minus WPA? Because WPA is clear. We said that we would sacrifice our own party in order for a grand coalition. Why is it the WPA has gotten it right and the others have not gotten it right? I'm trying to get you guys to get your teeth into that question.
We have had years of discussion on this issue. We have come to a clear position that this is a critical election. There are no second chances here. If the PPP only finds a way of winning this election, African Americans in Guyana will be set back for another 10, 20 years. The oil resources are too great to be left in the hands of the PPP, which is showing absolutely no signs of compromising and sharing the development of this country amongst the races and the political parties. Their role in parliament right now is to smother any legitimate opposition. So this is a critical election. It has dimensions that will go far into the future because the oil resources coming on stream is going to give a super advantage to the party that wins the next election. So the African Guyanese race is fighting for its very survival and will have to sweep aside any party that behaves as an obstacle towards the goal of removing the PPP government.
Yeah, Sister Audreyanna, and I'm pressing this question because I think it is a phenomenon that needs explanation. I think all of the leaders, all of the parties on the opposition side, PNC, AFC, all of the parties and leaders are agreed with the base that the PPP must go. The base is, however, saying the way it must go, the best way to get it to go is through a broad grand coalition. And I think the disconnect is that the leadership seems not to be as astute as the base is in terms of the method to remove. Now, subjectively they may, but we have to take them at their political behavior. Talk to us. Why the disconnect?
Dr. Hines, I agree with Brother Rohit. What the word in the street is that 2020 was the mother of all elections. 2025 is the god of all elections. And so people are, I think the opposition supporters, the base, they've made up their minds that they will not spend another 5 years under this kind of governance. So the challenge for them is if they're not going to spend the next 5 years under this kind of governance, what do they do if the government does not change? And that I don't think that some of the leaders in the opposition are understanding, that people have made up their minds that they will not spend another 5 years under this kind of governance. And if it is that they're not going to spend the next 5 years under this kind of governance, if you do not win, or at least do everything within your power to win, what are they going to do? And I think that the leaders have to understand that. And I think it's the same reason why I guess Pandit Ubraj wrote about you, coming back to what you were asking, Brother Rohit, about your party and the level of consciousness. When I hear, let's say, criticisms coming from, when I saw the criticism from Pandit Ubraj Narayan and from, I think Ravi Dev understands. I won't say that Ravi Dev does not understand very deeply issues of race. And I think that some people, and when the president is asking, show the evidence and so on, I'm coming back to the point, show the evidence. I think there's a peripheral understanding, and that there's not this deep consciousness that what African Guyanese, and not only African Guyanese, poor people, Amerindian Guyanese, even Indo-Guyanese, and people generally who do not agree with the government. It's not supporting them, but agreeing with them. And so the government has built this fortress world, like I wrote about it the other day. And so what people are seeing is that if you are not in this fortress world, they're seeing what could happen to you. Take, for example, that policeman, and I'll wrap up on this. That policeman just shook Muhammad's hand, and from what I read, he was transferred. Now, how can people spend another 5 years in a country where even if you are courteous and polite to shake somebody's hand, it can impact on your employment? And my last point on that, we have a British heritage, which was very proper. So our leaders are not even taking that sociological aspect into our history, into their considerations. So I think that people have reached the stage where they're thinking that what will we do for the next 5 years if the opposition does not win? As a matter of fact, last point here, Dr. Hines, what some people are saying is that the opposition must show them, if you do not win the next elections, how do you intend to negotiate some kind of different governance way of life for the people of Guyana, so as to ease this constant disrespect and bombardment against their very humanity? So this is a fight, Dr. Hines, for the humanity of Black people, most of whom are supporters of the opposition. It's a fight for the humanity of poor people, Amerindian people, Indo-Guyanese who do not support the government, the PPPC, right? And so it's really a fight for humanity. And people will not stop being human beings after September 1st.
Yeah.
So what happens to their humanity?
Yeah, thank you very much, sister. I think you've the base, because of what they're going through at the human level. They despair about what will happen in 5 years. And they've raised this thing to a do or die. And the leaders, I don't think, understand it at that level. They understand it, I think they do. I think they do, they understand the crucialness of this election. But I think where they're not connecting with their mass, with their supporters, is that their supporters have internalized this in almost like a spiritual way that is beyond just party and politics. And they're really saying, in order for us to part these waters and get to the other side, all you have to, Joshua and Jacob and all of you, got to hold hands. And I think our leaders are still seeing it as form and not content. And I am not saying that we in the WPA are superior. No, we are not. But I think that we have our ears to the ground, not in a superficial way, but in a humanistic way. What is this? What is the PPP doing to the humanity of all its peoples, especially the darkest among us, but all of us? And if you understand that resolve, then Semtitoti and presidential candidate and consensus candidate don't enter your mind. What enters your mind is, how do we come together and strategize to move this Leviathan? And I think that's where my brother and sister leaders may be faltering. They know that only a coalition can remove the PPP. They know that their people are suffering and will suffer another 5 years. But I don't think that they are tuned in to how spiritual that has become for the base, in particular the African base. And I think, Brother UC once said that if Jagan were a Hindu or, a spiritual, more spiritual, he might have been more effective. And I think it is not just for Jagan. I think for a lot of political leaders, we see politics as numbers, as voters, and we don't see them as human beings first, and human beings second, and human beings third. I think that's where the disconnect is. And you put it, that for most African people, what are we going to do? And that's deep. What are we going to do in another 5 years on this program right now? They're talking about partition. They're talking about partition on this program. And when I asked you all earlier why somebody would call me a deodorizer in chief, when the other side sees me as the racist in chief, it's precisely that point, that the PPP has hardened the African Guyanese community and the opposition community to the point. I think, I know the brother don't think that I'm deodorizing, but the point he's making is that when I call them sister and I call them brother, I am humanizing them. And his point is that we don't need to humanize people. Jack Dio embraced it today. He said, they call me the demon, right? And quite rightly, people see him as that. So we are at a critical point where I think our leaders don't understand that this thing is not surface. This thing goes deep within our Guyanese belly, our African Guyanese belly. And until they understand that, they are going to be talking about who this and who going to be president this and who going to be president that. I'm not saying those things are not important. Those things are important. You have to have people who can run a government and so on, right? But it is more than that. This is life and death. This is slavery or freedom. This is colonialism or independence. That's where we are at the moment. And I think that's why they don't like some of us speaking, because we frame it in those terms. And when I ask you all, not African Guyanese and cussing Norton, it's the leaders saying Norton not electable. African Guyanese, when they're talking to Mohammed, it's not Norton electability they're talking about. They're talking about PPP, devilishness. But our leaders are talking about electability. Our leaders are cussing Matty, but the people, they are cussing the PPP. And the PPP who once felt that they could walk in African Guyanese community and buy their votes, listen to what those people are telling Mohammed. Mohammed has become a vessel, I think, for the venting. Look at Indians, all right? Now, there is a view that maybe Indians are cocking Mohammed. Whether that is true or not, I don't know. I don't know the Indian community well. That's why I was asking Rohit to help us out there, right? Whether what we are seeing on the Indian part is genuine or whether it's half genuine, what it is, right? I don't understand the Indian psyche in the same way that I understand the African psyche. And that is why I could spot very quickly that none of those Africans who venting, talking about Northern electability and 70-30, they are focused like an eagle on the PPP. And if I were the PPP, I would be shivering because clearly they miscalculated the steeliness of African people. Clearly they may be underestimating a small section of the Indian community. Now, all it takes is 5,000 Indian votes to separate from the PPP. It's one seat. And they're now in power because of one seat. So if I were them, I would be concerned about what the Indians are telling Mohammed. I'm not at this point ready to talk about whether Mohammed is ready for leadership. And he's playing the role of sounding a sounding box for both communities. And I think even the Amerindian communities are using him as a sounding block. So that's my long editorial. As we move forward with our rapid fire, should prisoners on remand be allowed to vote? Yes or no? No long big thesis. Rohit?
Yes.
Sister Audreyanna, should prisoners, in particular those on remand, be allowed to vote?
Those on the remand, yes.
Those on the remand, yes.
But I don't have a deep-seated position on it.
Yes, but Vincent Alexander was here last night.
I saw him. I listened to him.
And if you have on remand 3,000, 2,000 people who are denied their right to vote, that's half a seat. And we know that the majority population in jail are of one ethnic group, all right? So the answer to a question like that, it has deep implications. Rohit, are we going to have...
On that score, you are innocent until proven guilty.
Yes, and you still have your right. You still have your right. Rohit, are we going to see a joint opposition, including the AFC?
I don't have the answer to that.
No, I'm not asking you to answer. I'm saying from now, right? Yes or no? If you had to make a thing now, are we likely yes or no? From everything that we are seeing on the table right now.
I would have to go on common sense, yes.
Sister Audreyanna?
Dr. Hines, I would go on faith. Yes.
Yes, I love you.
And I would just two more sentences. I would say, Brother Nigel, if the opposition does not win the government on the 1st of September, what plans do you have for the supporters of the opposition? Brother Aubrey, if the opposition does not win the elections on September 1st, what plans do you have for the supporters of the opposition to cause the PPPC government, if they go back into power, to humanize your support base? What plans do you have?
And what a note to end on. Some questions there for Brother Nigel and Brother Aubrey for obvious reasons. The last couple of days we've seen the back and forth, all the demands and the counter demands, there is still hope that there can be a grand coalition. There is still hope. I want to join you all and saying, I want to keep hope alive from where I am now. One part of me saying no, but the part of me that is hearing the heartbeat of the people, the opposition, is saying yes. And that's what you're calling faith. And that's what, Rohit, what did you say? You have to go
Common
on
sense.
common sense. I think that's what it is. My sister, my brother, thank you all very much. It has been quite a spirited discussion.
You're welcome, Doctor. Good night. Good night, brother.
And to you, the audience, let's keep the faith. Let's keep the faith, because faith has brought us this far, and faith is going to see us through. I think I'm paraphrasing Amazing Grace there, no? See you all tomorrow night. I'm likely to have an all-star big team tomorrow night. Big cast.